In just 30 minutes, a nameless old man shattered a corrupt system that took 15 years to build. No weapons, no shouting. Just one sentence in court exposed the darkest secrets of power. Who is Elias Mercer? Why did federal agents arrive in exactly 30 minutes? Stay till the end to uncover the truth. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more jaw-dropping stories that reveal the hidden world behind the badge now. Let's go back to the moment it all began. The fluorescent lights above Courtroom 4B hummed faintly, casting a cold, artificial glow across the polished wooden benches and sterile linoleum floor. The air inside was heavy with that distinct courtroom tension, a silence not born of respect, but of fatigue. This was supposed to be just another tedious civil case. Another day in the machinery of justice. The case at hand involved a high-stakes medical ethics trial, technical, complicated, the kind of case that drowns jurors in jargon and expert testimony. The prosecutor, a young, sharp-suited man named Patrick Colburn, moved with rehearsed confidence, his words sliced through the silence, amplified by his theater-trained voice. According to Section 6, Clause C of the 1994 Medical Accountability Act, he declared, flipping through his stack of laminated documents as though they were holy scriptures, the hospital was well within its rights to suspend emergency triage protocols under the discretionary clause. His voice oozed certainty. The jurors, already fatigued from hours of technical arguments, followed his pacing eyes like spectators watching a magician perform. The defense team sat stiff. Their objections stalled. The judge, a weathered woman named Judge Halberd, made notes with deliberate slowness, occasionally raising her brow but saying nothing. From the back row of the gallery, a man shifted, not much a slight, almost imperceptible movement. But in a room trained to detect disruption, it was like a tremor in still waters. Elias Mercer stood. He was an old man, his age evident in the deep etchings across his dark skin, like a map of years long survived. His coat was plain, slightly too warm for the room's frigid air conditioning, his hands folded gently at his waist. His eyes, though weathered, burned with an ancient clarity. He did not rise with fanfare or anger, but with the kind of stillness that demands to be seen. "You misquoted Section 6, Clause C," Elias said, his voice low, textured, and calm. Not loud, not forceful, just undeniable. The words didn't echo, they landed. Everything stopped. The prosecutor froze mid-step, eyes darting toward the sound like prey sensing a predator it couldn't see. The judge's pen hovered above her notepad. The bailiff's head snapped to attention. Even the jury shifted in their seats, their collective breath held in a single, shared pause. Captain Samuel Dorne, leaning against the back wall near the double doors, straightened instantly. His uniform creaked as his posture tightened. His eyes narrowed as they locked onto the old man. Dorne had seen plenty of interruptions before angry defendants, emotional family members, political activists, but this was different. The man hadn't shouted. He hadn't broken decorum. His words were deliberate, factual, and chilling. "What did you say?" Prosecutor Colburn asked, voice shaky, as if daring the old man to repeat himself. Elias Mercer's eyes didn't waver. "Clause C governs federally certified emergency triage protocols. What you referenced applies under Clause D, which concerns diagnostic risk assessments. Your argument is built on the wrong foundation." Another silence bloomed, heavier this time. The judge blinked, processing. The defense attorney's jaw tightened. The jury exchanged glances, and someone in the audience audibly gasped. The entire courtroom had fallen into an unnatural paralysis, as if the very structure of authority had shifted slightly off its axis. Captain Dorne pushed off the wall, walking forward with deliberate steps. The heel of his boots struck the floor with a weight that made each stride feel like a countdown. To him, this wasn't just an interruption, it was an attack. An outsider daring to disrupt his domain. A black man standing uninvited, daring to speak law in a system that long ago decided who was allowed to speak. "You got a law degree." Grandpa Dorne sneered, his voice loud enough for everyone to hear. The room flinched at his condescension. Elias Mercer turned his head slightly, meeting Dorne's eyes without fear. "I've read more law than you've enforced, Captain." A few jurors shifted uncomfortably. The prosecutor's cheeks flushed. The judge tapped her gavel gently, one strike. Not for order, but for composure. "Sir," Judge Halberd said, her voice tight, "you need to sit down." Elias nodded once and lowered himself back onto the bench with the same graceful precision, as though allowing the courtroom to exhale after holding its breath. But the damage was done. His correction wasn't just legal, it was symbolic. He had cracked the courtroom's illusion of infallibility. But Captain Dorne couldn't let it go. Not here. Not in front of so many eyes. His partner, Officer Kyle Mercer, a young, uneasy man, ironically sharing the old man's last name, whispered, "Sam, maybe just let it slide. He's not causing harm." Dorne shook his head. "No, this one's trying to make a statement." The courtroom moved forward awkwardly, but a tension had settled into the room's bones like a silent alarm no one knew how to disable. Every lawyer's argument now carried the shadow of Mercer's words. Every objection tasted hollow. Every ruling felt fragile. Elias Mercer remained still, not as a challenge, not as an act of defiance, simply as presence. And that, to Captain Dorne, was the most dangerous thing of all. Because a man who doesn't flinch, who speaks once and says enough to rearrange the entire mood of a courtroom, is not a man you can control with a badge. What none of them knew, what Captain Dorne would learn far too late, was that this quiet disruption wasn't random. It was the opening move, the first step in a reckoning. 15 years in the making. The courtroom had barely begun to breathe again after Elias Mercer's quiet correction. But for Captain Samuel Dorne, the air remained thick. Too thick. That single sentence, delivered in a voice no louder than a casual conversation, had tilted the scales in a place where Dorne believed he controlled the balance. And now, every tick of the clock sounded like a challenge. He couldn't let it stand. For 15 years, Samuel Dorne had lived in a world where the uniform granted him authority, where silence meant consent, and where the system bent to his will without question. But today, this old man had disrupted that illusion in front of everyone, in front of the judge, the jury, the attorneys, the spectators. The courtroom was no longer his stage. Elias Mercer had stolen the narrative with nothing but a calm voice and an inconvenient truth. As the judge tried to restore order, tapping her gavel once more with growing discomfort, Dorne's jaw clenched. He took 3 slow, heavy steps toward Mercer. The click of his boots echoed like countdown shots in the quiet room. His partner, Officer Kyle Mercer, shifted nervously behind him, whispering, "Sam, don't. It's not worth it." But Dorne didn't even blink. He challenged me in open court. Dorne whispered back, venom lacing each word. That is the worth. Reaching the back row. Dorne stood over Elias Mercer. The old man hadn't moved since sitting back down. His hands were folded in front of him, eyes forward, calm as if the courtroom, the uniformed officer, and the rising tension didn't concern him at all. "You think you're clever, old man," Dorne muttered, voice low enough for only Mercer to hear. "Standing up in my courtroom like you own the place." Mercer finally turned his head, his gaze cutting through Dorne like glass slicing through fabric. His eyes held no fear, no anger. Just wait. This isn't your courtroom, Captain. And it never was. Dorne's skin prickled. His heart pounded just a little harder. Those words weren't simply bold, they were surgical. Mercer wasn't challenging his authority. He was dismantling it. Dorne couldn't allow it to continue. "Stand up," he commanded, louder now, ensuring everyone heard. His voice cracked the silence like a whip. The room tensed again. All eyes swung back toward the back row. The judge hesitated, mouth opening to speak but stopping herself. No one objected. No one moved. They were all witnesses now. Elias Mercer rose slowly, deliberately. Every movement was measured, controlled. He moved not like a man being ordered, but like one allowing the moment to unfold on his terms. Outside, Dorne barked, grabbing Mercer by the elbow, not violently, but firmly, enough to make a show. The old man didn't resist. His body moved with the pull, but his head remained turned, eyes locked directly on Dorne's face. "You're making a mistake, Captain," Mercer said softly, his voice barely above a whisper, yet impossibly loud in Dorne's ears. "One you've made before." Dorne's breath caught. The words hit a place he kept buried. A place 15 years old. "What did you say?" Dorne growled. Mercer said nothing more. But that silence spoke louder than any outburst could. Dorne's grip tightened involuntarily, knuckles whitening. His partner followed closely behind as they led Mercer through the gallery toward the courtroom doors. The room watched, not a soul intervening, not even the judge. Fear, uncertainty, or perhaps guilt held them in place. As the doors swung open and the fluorescent hallway lights bled into the courtroom, Mercer spoke again, this time even softer. "Charleston." Dorne stiffened mid-stride, as though the word itself had weight. The name struck him like a steel rod to the chest. His steps faltered for a moment before quickly recovering. His partner frowned, confused, but said nothing. "You don't know what you're talking about," Dorne hissed through clenched teeth, yanking Mercer further into the corridor. "Keep walking." But Mercer continued, calm and relentless. 2006. The hearing. You were younger then. Same eyes, same badge, same silence. Dorne's throat tightened for a split second. The images flashed unbidden in his mind, a dimly lit federal chamber, a frightened young man cuffed to a metal table, blood trailing from his lip, and his own younger self standing in the corner, watching, saying nothing. "You've been watching me," Dorne snapped, his voice a strange blend of anger and fear. "No," Mercer replied evenly. "You were watching me." The words wrapped around Dorne's mind like cold chains. Every inch of authority he thought he held now felt fragile, brittle under Mercer's gaze. The hallway seemed longer than it should have been, the walls narrowing as though squeezing him into his own past. You think you can stand in my courtroom and pull this Dorne barked louder now, trying to reclaim ground. You're nothing but an old man with a grudge. Mercer didn't even blink. No, Captain, I'm a mirror, and you're finally seeing your reflection. They reached the secured door at the end of the corridor, leading into the back of the precinct. Dorne slammed his access card against the reader, the door unlocking with a sharp metallic click. As they passed through into the inner holding area, the energy shifted again. The public was now behind them. No audience, no judge. Just bare institutional walls, surveillance cameras, and the hollow hum of buzzing fluorescent bulbs. Dorne shoved Mercer forward, trying to shake the rattling weight building in his chest. You want to play games? You picked the wrong man. Mercer finally allowed himself a small, nearly imperceptible smile. No, Captain, I picked the right one. His words felt surgical, each one sliced into Dorne's carefully constructed armor, exposing old wounds the captain had spent 15 years pretending weren't there. You think you understand the system, Mercer continued, his voice low but growing heavier with each word. You wear the badge. You bark the orders. You enforce the rules. But you've forgotten one truth. Dorne spun around, face flushed. And what's that? Mercer leaned in, his breath calm as ever. The system doesn't belong to you. You serve it. And when it's done protecting you, it buries you. For the first time. Dorne's bravado cracked. Before he could respond, the sound of his partner's nervous voice broke the air. Sam, maybe we should shut up. Dorne snapped, louder than necessary, as if volume alone could hold back the unraveling. The silence returned heavier than before. Mercer stood still again, hands folded, as if waiting for what was already coming. The retaliation had begun. But Samuel Dorne didn't realize yet this wasn't his show anymore. It was the beginning of his unraveling. The door sealed behind them with a soft mechanical hiss, locking Elias Mercer and Captain Samuel Dorne inside the holding area. The hum of the air conditioning was sharp, cold, almost surgical. Here, away from the courtroom's gaze, away from the judge's weak objections and the jury's frightened eyes. Dorne believed he could regain control. But already, the ground beneath him was shifting. Mercer stood in the center of the narrow holding room, perfectly still. His coat hung neatly, his hands folded at his waist. His breathing remained calm, measured, like a man who had rehearsed this moment for years. Dorne, on the other hand, was restless. He paced like a caged animal, his boots clapping against the linoleum floor. His partner, Officer Kyle Mercer, lingered uneasily near the door, unsure whether to stay or flee. You want to play these games in my station, Mercer Dorne growled. His voice clipped. You want to throw out names from years ago and act like they mean something? They don't, not anymore. But Mercer simply tilted his head, studying Dorne as if dissecting him piece by piece. 15 years. Samuel, he said softly, and you still flinch when you hear it. Dorne's jaw flexed, his fingers twitched at his sides. I don't flinch. Yes, you do, Mercer continued, his tone like smooth stone grinding against glass. You flinch because you remember. The room seemed to shrink, as if the walls leaned in closer with every passing second. The silence between them grew heavier, not empty, but full of memory, of names, of buried decisions clawing their way back into the present. You think you know something, Dorne said, voice hardening again, but you don't know what happened back then. You don't know what I saw. I know exactly what you saw, Mercer replied, his voice sharpening. Because I saw it too. The words landed like a blade drawn with unbearable precision. Dorne's eyes flashed. But Mercer didn't let him speak. Charleston. 2006, Mercer said, his voice growing heavier, as though every syllable carried the weight of years. Federal Hearing Room, Room 13. Dorne's throat tightened. Mercer's eyes, ancient and unyielding, locked onto him like a hunter watching prey squirm. You stood in the back that day, hands behind your back. You never spoke. You never intervened. You just watched. I was following orders. Dorne hissed, his voice cracking for the first time. No, Mercer said calmly. You were following silence. The temperature in the room felt like it dropped several degrees. Dorne's breath came out heavier, each inhale laced with guilt he could no longer suppress. You didn't stop it, Mercer whispered. You watched them break him. The name hovered, unsaid, but it was already alive in the room. Marcus Mercer. My brother. Elias finally spoke the name. You watched them kill my brother. The words hit Dorne like a fist he couldn't dodge. His vision blurred for a fraction of a second. A dizzying flash of the past ripping through his mind. Marcus, cuffed to the steel chair, the harsh overhead light, the interrogator's fists striking his ribs, blood sliding down his chin, the young man gasping for breath between pleas that echoed against the concrete walls, and Dorne, standing in the back of the room, silent, still, watching. He was just a junior officer then, green, hungry for promotion, afraid to step out of line. The commanding agent had given him one order that day. Observe. Do not interfere. And he obeyed. He hadn't raised a voice when Marcus was beaten, hadn't lifted a hand when the boy collapsed forward, his body convulsing from the trauma. When the medics arrived too late, when the report was doctored, when Marcus was pronounced dead from complications during questioning, Dorne signed the incident log without blinking. And then he buried it. Buried it under 15 years of promotions, commendations, and career advancement. 15 years of pretending that day was nothing more than a distant procedural memory. Until now. Marcus never got his verdict, Mercer said, his voice softer, but somehow even more cutting, because the system you serve was never built to give it to him. Dorne's breathing grew shallower, his chest tightened. That was above my pay grade. I wasn't the one giving the orders. No, Mercer said. Voice even, steady, you were the one who stayed quiet. The room seemed to pulse, as though even the walls recognized the weight of the truth finally being spoken aloud. The fluorescent lights buzzed faintly above them, the only witnesses to the reckoning that had been delayed for 1.5 decades. Why now? Dorne whispered, his voice trembling. Why come back after all this time? Mercer took a slow step forward. Not aggressive, but deliberate. His gaze was unrelenting. Because the system you hid behind finally opened the door. And you walked through it. The courtroom, the arrest, the trial, all of it was never random. It was bait, a carefully orchestrated path to draw Dorne into the light he had so carefully avoided for 15 years. You knew I was there that day, Mercer continued. I was standing behind the observation glass. I watched you lower your head when the verdict came down. Dorne swallowed hard, but the words choked in his throat. I waited, Mercer said, his voice growing heavier, more intimate, year after year. I watched your name climb the ranks. I watched you bury the paperwork. I watched you convince yourself you did nothing wrong. I didn't hurt him, Dorne blurted, as though that single sentence might grant him some last flicker of absolution. Mercer's face hardened. No. You just stood there. And that's worse. The words punctured whatever thin armor Dorne had left. His hands trembled at his sides. The captain who once commanded courtrooms and corridors now looked small, like a man shrinking beneath the very badge he once used to shield himself. Behind them, Officer Kyle shifted again, wide-eyed, as though finally glimpsing a truth that had been hidden from him since the moment they dragged Mercer from the courtroom. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was full of 15 years of unspoken consequence. You've carried it all these years, Samuel, Mercer whispered. But I carried Marcus. Dorne's chest heaved. He couldn't respond. There was nothing left to say that could rewrite the truth now standing in front of him. But Mercer wasn't finished. Today, he said, I'm not here to punish you. Captain, I'm here to remind you, because some stains don't fade with time. They only wait. The temperature in the room felt like it dropped again. Outside, in exactly 15 minutes. 6 black SUVs were already rolling toward the precinct. The reckoning had begun. The silence inside the holding room thickened, wrapping itself around Captain Samuel Dorne like a cold, tightening coil. Elias Mercer stood unmoved, a statue of patience and quiet judgment, while Dorne's breathing grew heavier, the weight of 15 years pressing on his chest. But behind Dorne's rising panic, a deeper fear had begun to take root, one far more dangerous than guilt. The unknown. You think you've cornered me, old man, Dorne muttered, trying to shake off the growing tremor in his voice. But you forget who holds the system. I've got your fingerprints, your face in a few minutes. You'll be just another name logged into federal custody. Mercer didn't respond. He didn't need to. His silence was like a loaded weapon, steady, aimed and waiting. Dorne spun toward his partner. Kyle, get his prints scanned. Run full biometric workups. Full spectrum. Kyle Mercer hesitated. Captain, now, Dorne barked, the authority returning to his voice for a fleeting moment, like a man clinging to a ledge slipping beneath him. The young officer nodded quickly and guided Elias toward the scanning terminal. The old man walked without resistance, his calm demeanor unshaken, his fingertips pressed against the glass scanner, steady as stone. The machine hummed as the red light swept across his hand, extracting every ridge and valley of his fingerprints with surgical precision. The system chirped once, then again, then a third time. No match found. The screen blinked with sterile indifference. No data located. Dorne's jaw clenched. Run it again. The technician complied, entering the override sequence. The machine scanned the old man's prints a second time, feeding the data through the Federal Biometric Identification System, cross-referencing with military archives, criminal databases, international intelligence logs, and black ops files. No match found. Dorne's stomach twisted, but his voice hardened, trying to mask it. Facial scan. The camera activated with a soft click. Mercer stood perfectly still, allowing the system to capture every angle of his face. The system processed, analyzing bone structure, iris patterns, facial symmetry data fed through the Department of Defense. the CIA, the NSA, and Interpol within seconds. No match found. The room pulsed with a strange hum, as if the technology itself had grown uncomfortable under Mercer's gaze. "That's impossible," Dorne hissed. His fingers trembled slightly as he leaned toward the screen. "Expand the search. Run deep archives, legacy files, Cold War records, special access programs. I want everything." The technician hesitated. "Captain, that's classified clearance." Dorne's eyes flared. "Do it." The technician swallowed, but his fingers obeyed. The deeper system layers unlocked one by one as override codes were entered. Servers spun up across multiple federal nodes, reaching into data vaults buried beneath 3 decades of classified information. The search widened. No match found. Dorne staggered back, as if physically struck by the emptiness flashing across the screen. "That doesn't make sense," he spat. "Nobody is off record. Not anymore." And yet, the system displayed nothing, not unknown, not redacted, not sealed, simply absent. Elias Mercer stood a few feet away, watching it all unfold, like a man witnessing a prophecy finally being fulfilled. "No birth certificate," Mercer said softly, his voice cutting through the mechanical hum like a whisper in a hurricane. "No tax record, no military service log, no social security number, no passport, no driver's license, no hospital intake file, no voting record." His eyes locked onto Dorne's, voice dropping into something colder. "No trail." Dorne's lips quivered. "Everyone leaves something." Mercer allowed himself the faintest flicker of a smile. "Not everyone." The words landed with surgical precision. They weren't bravado. They were fact. Dorne felt it like an itch crawling beneath his skin, gnawing into his ribcage. "Check for aliases," Dorne snapped. The technician already had. "Sir, we're not getting null responses. We're getting blank queries. There's nothing. No data points. It's like he was never entered." Dorne felt his chest tighten as a new terror whispered in his ear. This wasn't a man who slipped through the cracks. This was a man the cracks were built to hide. He turned sharply to Mercer. "Who?" His voice faltered before finding its footing. "Who are you?" Elias tilted his head slightly, voice steady as ever. "That's the question you should have asked before you put your hands on me." The room seemed colder now. Even the fluorescent lights flickered above them, uncertain whether they still illuminated a precinct or a tomb. The tech officer spoke again, voice softer now, almost reverent. "Sir, he's not unregistered. He's off-network, beyond black." Dorne spun. "What does that mean?" The technician's fingers hovered nervously above the keyboard. "It means the system doesn't just not have him. It was built to not see him." Dorne swallowed hard, his mouth dry. His brain worked feverishly to cling to procedural logic, to something that made sense. But every rulebook he'd built his career on was crumbling. Mercer continued, his voice now a thread weaving through Dorne's panic. "You live your life believing the system has eyes everywhere. But there are rooms even the system doesn't enter. Rooms where people like me are not filed, but designed. Designed." The word carried too much weight. Dorne's mind reeled. You're your government," he managed. "I was something," Mercer said simply. "Now I'm something else." Dorne's partner, Kyle, spoke for the first time. His voice hushed. "Captain, maybe we need to call in?" "No," Dorne snapped, spinning around. His voice trembled with frustration. "We don't escalate this. We handle it here." The technician shook his head. "Sir, we're already past that, because on the edge of every secured console, a silent alert was blinking, a code Dorne didn't recognize. 3 letters etched in red OB7. The deeper levels had been notified. Dorne's knees weakened as his authority slipped through his fingers like sand. And across the room, Elias Mercer watched, silent, calm, prepared, like a man who had stood here long before this day, and long before these men ever put on their uniforms. "You thought I was a name to be processed," Mercer whispered. "But you're not processing me, Captain." He paused, the faintest trace of gravity tightening his voice. "You're walking into something that has already started, and somewhere outside that building." 6 black SUVs continued their silent approach, each mile bringing them closer to the moment Samuel Dorne's entire world would collapse. The blinking red OB7 alert pulsed on the monitors like a silent siren, each flash slicing into Captain Samuel Dorne's nerves like cold wire. The deeper the system searched for Elias Mercer, the emptier it became. No aliases, no files, no fingerprints, no past. And now something far worse, something the system itself had been designed to never speak of, had quietly awakened. The technician stared at his terminal, pale. "Captain, this is triggering something we don't control." Dorne's chest heaved. He stepped closer, eyes scanning the unfamiliar code streaming across the screens. The system no longer responded to his commands. Every keystroke returned the same cruel message: "Access overridden." In the corner of the room, Elias Mercer remained seated, hands calmly folded across his lap, eyes steady. He watched Dorne's unraveling without a trace of gloating, as though witnessing an inevitability long written. "You need to shut it down," Dorne barked. "Kill the connection." The technician's fingers flew over the keyboard. "I've already tried. Every override's been rerouted. Even admin protocols aren't responding." Dorne spun toward his partner, voice sharp and ragged. "Kyle, pull external lines. Cut the network." Kyle hesitated. His hands trembled as he reached for the emergency shutdown switch beneath the main console. With a metallic clack, the circuit severed. The screens stayed on. The terminal hummed. Screens still blinking calmly, as if nothing had changed. The system hadn't needed the network anymore. And then it happened. The monitors shifted. The blinking red alert dissolved, replaced by a single, cold message flashing across every screen: "Echo protocol activated." The words struck the air like a hammer. And then, one by one, the lights across the precinct dimmed. Not a blackout, not chaos, but deliberate. Surgical isolation. Emergency locks engaged with mechanical finality. Steel doors slid into place, securing corridors, exits, even stairwells. Badge readers flickered once, then froze. Every camera lens shuttered simultaneously. The building exhaled and then held its breath. A complete, silent lockdown. The precinct had transformed into something else entirely. No alarms blared. No klaxons screamed. This wasn't a malfunction. It was a procedure. One the officers inside were never meant to see triggered. "What the hell is Echo Protocol?" Dorne demanded, voice sharp, rising into the silence. Elias Mercer finally moved. He unfolded his hands, stood up slowly, and stepped forward into the dimmed light. His voice was calm, terrifyingly measured. You've reached the wall. Captain, Dorne's chest tightened. Explain it, Mercer continued, his tone surgical. Echo Protocol is an internal failsafe. When high-risk profiles like mine are improperly accessed without proper clearance, the system assumes one of two possibilities: compromise or containment failure. The words felt too large to fit inside Dorne's chest. This precinct is no longer operational, Mercer added. It's neutralized. Kyle's voice cracked from behind. Neutralized? How? What does that even mean? It means, Mercer said, stepping closer, you're not the ones in charge anymore. The lights flickered again, brief, like the pulse of a dying heartbeat. The hum of hidden machinery filled the silence as the building's internal AI architecture shifted control away from local command. Dorne tried to steady his breath, his authority crumbling beneath his boots. You're bluffing. This is some kind of deep cover trick. Mercer's voice dropped lower, quieter, but far more dangerous. If I were bluffing. Captain, you would have never made it to this stage. The technician interrupted, his voice thin with panic. Captain, our external lines are dead. Even satellite uplinks. No outgoing signals. The firewalls have sealed themselves. Kyle took a step back toward the door, instinctively checking his radio. Nothing but static. We're completely cut off. Dorne's stomach turned. Sweat beaded across his brow. How is that even possible? Dorne whispered. Mercer smiled faintly. Because Echo Protocol was never written into your manuals. Only select units were trained to recognize its activation. And you, Captain, were never meant to encounter someone like me. The temperature in the room felt colder now, as though the walls themselves disapproved of Dorne's presence. The air was still, but carried weight like a pressure before a coming storm. You triggered this, Mercer continued, his voice almost clinical now. You scanned me 3 times. Each failure initiated a deeper tier of security response. The 3rd attempt. That's the threshold. Dorne staggered back a half step as realization finally sank in. This was built into the system, he asked, his voice thin. Mercer nodded slowly. Years ago, before your time, before your clearance level even existed. Dorne's face twisted, desperate to reclaim some control. Why? Why hide you? What are you? Mercer's eyes narrowed slightly. Not cruelly, but with something far colder pity. I'm the piece the system was never allowed to admit existed, he said softly. And when people like you touch things, you were never cleared to see. This happens. Another heavy steel door hissed shut somewhere in the distance, sealing the evidence storage wing. Then another door closed across the secondary stairwell. The entire station was folding inward, like a machine preparing for containment. Kyle stepped closer to Dorne, his voice shaking. Captain, we need to call someone. There's no one to call. The technician answered, his voice small. The building's been disconnected. The realization settled like iron chains across Dorne's shoulders. His breath became short, shallow. Then who the hell controls this now? Mercer exhaled, stepping forward, closer than before. His presence filled the space not with threat, but with command. They do. Dorne stared at him, his voice a broken whisper. Who's they? Mercer's lips barely moved. The ones you've never seen. The ones who built the silence into your badge long before you ever wore it. For a brief moment. The only sound was the faint hum of cooling fans working somewhere deep inside the secured systems and the countdown clock that silently activated across the corner monitors. 002957. Kyle's breath caught. Captain, that's a timer. Dorne's head snapped toward the screen. The numbers ticked down 29 minutes. 56 seconds. Now, 55. What happens when it reaches 0? Dorne asked, panic twisting in his gut. Mercer simply smiled again, not wide, not arrogant, but patient, as if this moment was as familiar to him as breathing. That, he said softly, depends on them. Dorne's legs wavered, his authority finally stripped bare under the harsh fluorescent light. His voice now no louder than a breath. What have I done? The timer continued its silent march toward something that neither Dorne, nor Kyle, nor anyone in that building could stop. And outside, just 3 miles away now, the 6 black SUVs advanced without a sound. The countdown kept ticking, steady and cold, 23 minutes and 12 seconds, and with every second that dropped, it felt heavier, like the walls were closing in. Captain Samuel Dorne just stood there, frozen. The soft hum of the precinct's machines filled the silence, but nothing answered him anymore. His badge, his voice, his orders, none of it mattered. The building wasn't a precinct anymore. It was just waiting for something. Something that was already coming. Outside, the city kept moving, like nothing was happening. But about 3 miles away, they were getting closer. 6 matte black SUVs, unmarked. No sirens, no flashing lights, just sliding through traffic like they belonged. They weren't in a rush. The tires moved like they were gliding on tracks, like they already knew exactly where to go. No police scanners picked them up. No city cameras logged their arrival. These weren't vehicles looking for permission. They were here because someone sent them. Inside the lead SUV, the team was already getting the final clearance, Omega Directive 9. Encrypted signals pulsed through channels nobody on the city grid could see. They weren't guests. They weren't visitors. They were here to reclaim something. The timer inside the precinct kept dropping 21 minutes and 7 seconds now. Dorne was pacing like a man trapped inside his own skin. His partner Kyle stood stiff near the terminal, wide-eyed, staring at the screen flashing the same message over and over. Echo protocol active. Outside command, override, engaged, Kyle whispered, his voice shaking. Captain, we need to get ready for whoever's coming. Ready for what? Dorne snapped. His voice cracked. We don't even know who we're dealing with across the room. Elias Mercer stood like a monument, hands behind his back, watching Dorne break down. This wasn't new to him. He'd seen men like Dorne fall apart before. You were never supposed to meet them, Mercer said softly. Most men with a badge like yours never even see behind the glass. Dorne's breath grew heavier. Who are they? Mercer's voice stayed calm. The ones who built the part of the system you like to pretend doesn't exist. The words sank into Dorne's gut like ice water. And then, as if on cue, the building responded. The proximity sensors flickered alive. But not alarms. Not warnings. It wasn't fear. It was recognition. Authorized entry. Omega Directive 9 verified. The timer ticked 18 minutes and 42 seconds. Outside. The SUVs glided up to the precinct entrance, not one of them out of sync. The engines barely made a sound. They paused for a moment, didn't rush, didn't hesitate. No one stepped out. They just sat there like their very presence was enough to bend the air. Then, with a soft click, the doors unlocked. 12 agents stepped out, 6 from the lead vehicle, 6 from the rest. Every move was smooth, Like they'd practiced this 100 times, but never in public. They wore charcoal tactical suits that swallowed the light. Matty helmets, sealed visors, no faces, no names, just one patch on their shoulder, black on black, OD9, Omega Directive 9. They didn't hesitate. They didn't speak. They moved toward the precinct like it already belonged to them. The motion sensors opened the doors before they even touched them. The entire station unfolded for them like it had been waiting. Inside, the last security doors unlatched with a soft hiss. Dorne heard it behind him, that click, and he spun around. The hallway lights dimmed slightly, like even the building knew who was in charge now. For a second, Dorne thought maybe one of them would at least look at him. None of them did. They just moved past him, like he wasn't even there. Kyle whispered, "Captain, they're not even looking at us." Mercer answered, just as calm as before, "Because we don't matter." The lead agent stopped at Mercer's reinforced glass cell. He pulled out a small black card from his hip, no bigger than a credit card, and tapped it on the lock. No beeps, no codes, no resistance. The door just opened with a soft sigh. Elias Mercer stepped out, smooth and steady. Not like a prisoner, not like someone being arrested, like a man being retrieved. Dorne felt his throat tighten. This wasn't law enforcement. This wasn't justice. This was a handoff. "Wait!" he choked, trying to find words. "Who authorized this? I'm the commanding officer here. This is my precinct, for the first time." The lead agent glanced at him just for a brief second. No expression, no voice, and then nothing. Instead, a calm, female voice cut through the silence. Dorne turned sharply. Out from behind the agents stepped a woman in a perfect black suit. No weapon, no badge, just a single black credential around her neck, with the Omega symbol gleaming faintly. She locked eyes with him. "Captain Dorne," she said. "Smooth as ice. You were never meant to be part of this." Dorne's mouth opened, but no words came. She continued, "This facility is now under sovereign lockdown by Omega Directive 9. Your jurisdiction no longer applies." But I," Dorne stammered, "I need to file a chain of command objection." She didn't blink. "There is no chain of command above Omega Directive." Mercer stepped forward, adjusting his sleeve one last time. The agents surrounded him like guards returning to their post. Dorne's voice dropped to a whisper. "You're not here to question him, are you?" The woman turned her head slightly. "Captain, we're not taking him. We're reclaiming him." Mercer looked at Dorne one final time, eyes calm. "I told you," he said quietly. "You should have asked who you were touching before you touched him." Without another word, Mercer stepped into formation. The agents turned in perfect sync and moved out like they had never even been there. And as the 6 black SUVs pulled away, the timer on Dorne's terminal stopped. 0. Dead still. The black SUVs were long gone. The silence they left behind was worse than any alarm. The precinct wasn't just quiet, it felt emptied, hollowed out, as if the building itself had exhaled and never bothered to breathe back in. Captain Samuel Dorne stood in the control room, eyes locked on the frozen timer still sitting at 0. That screen, once his window into everything, now stared back like a dead eye. His partner Kyle hovered behind him, unsure whether to speak, like even words could set something else in motion. "They're gone," Kyle finally whispered, voice dry. "What now?" Captain Dorne didn't answer. He couldn't. His thoughts were spinning in tight, panicked circles. He had just witnessed something he had no words for. No training manual, no federal handbook, no badge policy ever prepared him for what had unfolded. But this wasn't over. At exactly 9 o'clock, the heavy security door to the inner administration level unlatched itself with a soft, mechanical hiss, not like the earlier forced overrides, but like a scheduled appointment finally arriving. Dorne turned fast. His stomach tightened. His breath came shallow. His hands twitched. Half reaching for a weapon he knew would be useless. Through the open doorway stepped a woman. Her presence hit harder than the Omega agents had. Director Claudia Reyes. She moved like she belonged here, because in every sense that mattered. She did. Her black suit was tailored sharp. Military cut, but federal clean. Every line deliberate. Her hair was pulled tight. Her face calm. Unreadable. Not cold, controlled. A woman who carried not authority, but inevitability. Two silent aides flanked her but said nothing. They weren't security. They were witnesses. Dorne swallowed hard as Director Reyes stopped directly in front of him. "Captain Samuel Dorne," she said. Her voice was smooth, but there was no softness to it. Every word landed like a hammer carefully aimed. "You've had quite a morning." Dorne tried to hold on to what little command he had left. "Director Reyes, with respect, I need an immediate debriefing on who these men were, why they removed my prisoner, and under what." She raised her hand, just a small gesture, but it stopped him cold. "You don't need a debriefing," she said. "You need an explanation. And that is very different." Dorne's mouth tightened, but he didn't interrupt. Reyes took a breath. "What you witnessed today was not an operation gone rogue. This was not a breach of protocol or a violation of jurisdiction. This was an execution of long-standing authority under Omega Directive 9. Everything that occurred here today happened exactly as designed." Her words hit like a locked door slamming shut. She stepped closer. "The man you knew as Elias Mercer designation Echo 01 was never under your jurisdiction. He was not a suspect. He was not a civilian. He was part of an internal oversight program operating at a level you were never cleared to access." Dorne's head spun. "Oversight." She nodded, slow and exact. "Oversight. A shadow network built to observe systemic corruption, embedded in federal, state, and local agencies, including your department." The words froze the air between them. "That's impossible," Dorne said quickly, though even as he spoke, the defense sounded hollow. "No," Reyes answered sharply. "What's impossible is how long your file was allowed to stay buried." She reached into her briefcase and pulled out a thin folder. No markings, no labels, just weight. She held it up between them like a blade. "This is your reckoning, Captain." She opened the file. Inside were documents that should have never existed. Copies of old logs, suppressed complaints, redacted reports that still bled through enough to tell the truth beneath the ink. Photos Dorne hadn't seen in 15 years, or had tried very hard to forget. Charleston, 2006. The room. The boy. Marcus Mercer. Dorne's stomach twisted. "You think the system forgot?" Captain Reyes asked, voice even sharper now. "You think that by standing still, keeping your mouth shut, and letting others take the fall. Your slate stayed clean. That no one would ever look deeper." Dorne's hands shook. His face flushed hot, then cold. "You never filed the full report on Charleston," she continued. "You signed your name on a statement that omitted the excessive force. You claimed the victim resisted during interrogation. You signed off on the medical evaluation without challenge. And when the internal complaint was submitted by a junior officer, she flipped a page, tapping it. You personally recommended its dismissal. Dorne's throat dried completely. His heart pounded against his ribs. I was following orders, he whispered. I didn't call the shots in that room. But you made sure those who did never faced consequences. Reyes shot back. You chose the system over the truth. You let Elias Mercer die. And for 15 years, you built your entire career on that silence. Kyle took a half-step back behind him, his face pale, his eyes wide. It was clear now his captain wasn't who he thought he was. Director Reyes flipped the folder shut. Mercer's unit has been monitoring you ever since that day. You weren't just some random officer that Echo 01 bumped into in court. You were always the end point of the file. You simply didn't realize that your reckoning was already scheduled. Dorne stumbled back, as if the words physically struck him. I didn't know it would go that far, he stammered. I never meant. But you let it, Reyes said coldly. You let it because your comfort was worth more than someone else's life. The silence that followed was crushing. Dorne looked down at the floor, blinking fast, trying to stop his vision from blurring. His badge weighed heavier on his chest than it ever had before. Finally, Reyes delivered the final cut. Captain Samuel Dorne, she said with brutal precision. As of this moment, your authority has been permanently suspended. Your record is under full federal review. You will not return to this precinct. You will not wear that badge again. His lips parted. Nothing came out. This is not a debate, she added. This is history closing its hand around you. She turned and walked toward the door, her aides following in perfect silence. Dorne stood alone, still as stone, breathing shallow, lost inside the very system he once believed would always protect him. And for the first time in his career, Samuel Dorne finally understood what it meant to be on the wrong side of silence. The door clicked shut behind Director Claudia Reyes with the softest sound, but to Captain Samuel Dorne, it landed like a final verdict. She was gone, her voice echoing in his mind long after her heels stopped tapping against the tile. For a few moments, the only thing he heard was his own breath, quick, shallow, uneven. He wasn't handcuffed. No one dragged him away. There were no sirens, no formal arrest. And somehow, that made it worse. Instead, the system chose silence. The kind of silence that doesn't scream or strike. It simply removes you. Kyle still stood a few feet away, shifting uneasily like a man trying not to watch a drowning victim sink. The monitors inside the control room flickered, one by one. They rebooted familiar green prompts flashing across the screens. But something had changed. Dorne's name was gone. The station's login panel, which had once automatically greeted him with his badge number and access credentials, now greeted him with a blank screen. Access unauthorized. The air conditioning hummed softly in the background, like a machine unconcerned with human consequence. The building no longer recognized him. Dorne stepped toward the terminal, heart pounding. He swiped his badge across the reader, something he had done every day for years. The scanner blinked red. 3 quick tones followed. Denied. He swiped again, harder this time, as though force might change the answer. Denied. Kyle finally broke the silence. Captain. Dorne spun on him, his voice desperate. Run a manual override. Use your clearance to reset my access. Kyle hesitated, His face said it all: pity, confusion, and a growing realization that his superior officer was now a ghost. I don't think I can." "Sir," Kyle stammered. "Do it," Dorne snapped. Kyle obeyed, typing into the secondary console. His hands moved fast, familiar with the system's old override codes, but the terminal didn't even reject him. It simply ignored him. No error message. No prompt. The field where Dorne's profile once lived was now an empty database row. No name. No record. No trace. Kyle's voice trembled. "Sir, your file isn't here anymore." Dorne's chest tightened. His world was dissolving around him, pixel by pixel. He pulled his radio from his shoulder, flipped through frequencies. All channels returned dead silence. No dispatch. No central command. Not even static. Just nothing. Like he was talking into a void that had already forgotten him. He looked back at the main monitor. For years, that screen had given him control. Now, it simply displayed a message that chilled his blood. Command sequence finalized. User record purged. Outside the window, the precinct parking lot sat still under the morning sun, as if the world hadn't shifted inside these walls. His eyes locked on his reflection in the glass. For the first time, Dorne saw himself as the system now saw him, not as Captain Samuel Dorne, but as excess weight, a corrupted file, discarded. And then came the final ritual. The administrative aide entered quietly, as if not to disturb the weight of the room. A young woman in a gray suit, clipboard in hand, lips thin, eyes low. She didn't look at Dorne like an officer. She looked at him like paperwork. "Sir," she said, her voice clinical, almost bored. "Per federal order, your credentials are hereby revoked pending full procedural closure." She set 3 items neatly on the table before him. His badge, his sidearm, his department ID, laid out like relics from a dead man's past. "This is a formality." "Sir," she continued, "please surrender your issued equipment." Her words landed like nails into his ribs. Dorne stared at the items. They glared back at him like ghosts. For over 15 years, that badge had been his armor. That gun, his authority. That ID, his access to the system. They weren't just tools, they were his identity. Without them, he was nothing. The aide waited. No pressure, no threats, just a process. Clean, surgical. Dorne's hands trembled as he reached for the badge first. His thumb brushed across its surface one last time. Feeling the engraved numbers that once meant he mattered. Slowly, he placed it on the table. Next came his firearm. The cold metal kissed the wood with a hollow clack as it landed beside the badge. Finally, the ID. The smiling face frozen in the photograph mocked him now. A younger version of himself, full of certainty, full of blind ambition. The card slid out of his hand and onto the pile. The aide checked each item, nodded once, and turned to leave. No ceremony, no words of sympathy, just efficient erasure. And just like that, it was done. Dorne stood still, his empty hands hanging at his sides. The weight in his chest grew heavier, pressing into him like a vacuum he couldn't escape. The building he once commanded now moved on without him, as though he had never existed here at all. The badge scanner at the exit blinked green, ready for the next officer to enter. The desk phone rang with mundane administrative tasks. Technicians reset their terminals. And all around him, the machine hummed forward, unaffected. He was no longer part of it. Kyle stepped closer, his voice barely a whisper. "What do you want me to do?" Captain Dorne didn't respond. He couldn't even bring himself to answer to that title anymore. The collapse wasn't loud. It wasn't violent. It was absolute. As Mercer had warned, this was never his system. It had simply used him. And now, like any broken file, it deleted him, and outside, beyond the glass. Beyond the precinct, a new day had begun. People walked the streets. Cars rolled by. The world kept moving. The system remained intact. But Samuel Dorne was gone. Not arrested. Not imprisoned. Erased. Months passed. The city had moved on. Like it always does. New cases filled the court dockets. New officers filled the precinct halls. The buzz of bureaucracy hummed again, like nothing had ever happened. But beneath the polished floors and behind the quiet conference room doors, something had shifted. Something the system wouldn't advertise, but couldn't ignore. It was morning when Jordan Ellis stepped onto the marble steps of the Federal Justice Complex. The building towered above him, glass and steel wrapped in authority. Its windows reflecting the pale gold sunlight cutting through the clouds, for most people. Walking through those doors felt like stepping into the center of power. For Jordan, it felt like walking into history. He paused at the main entrance. His hands gripped a slim black folder. Inside it was everything that brought him here. His records, his assignment papers, and one document that carried more weight than any resume ever could, a letter stamped at the bottom with 2 simple characters, E01. No full name, no title, just the code. And for the people inside these walls, that code was all that mattered. Jordan was young, barely 21, but there was something behind his eyes that made him seem older. It wasn't arrogance, it was awareness, the kind you don't earn from textbooks or lectures. It was carried, passed down. The security guard at the entrance barely glanced up. Badge Jordan handed over his temporary credential. The guard scanned it, eyes flickering when the authorization came back faster than normal. "Intern intake's not for another 2 weeks," the guard said, squinting. "I know," Jordan replied, calm and steady. The guard glanced at the folder, spotted the corner of the letter sticking out, saw the faint E01 seal, and stopped asking questions. He handed the badge back, softer now. "You're clear." Jordan nodded, stepping through the scanner without hesitation. The metal detector let out a single soft beep, not an alert, but a recognition tone. The system already knew him. The lobby inside was polished, silent except for the low murmur of officials moving from one case to the next. People wore sharp suits, spoke in clipped conversations, eyes glued to their tablets. No one looked directly at him, but they all noticed him in small, sideways glances, the way people sense something just a little out of place, but can't quite name it. He passed a mural along the south wall, a massive installation celebrating decades of federal oversight and judicial reform. Painted figures of past directors, judges, and law enforcement officers stood proudly beneath the words, "Justice preserved, integrity protected." Jordan slowed only for a moment. One of the faces in that mural had once belonged to Captain Samuel Dorne. Not anymore. The artist had returned several months earlier, under quiet orders. Dorne's face was gone now. In its place was a faint outline, like a shadow erased. Behind that empty space, another figure had been added, not detailed, No features, just a silhouette standing with hands folded behind his back. A figure not meant to be known. But anyone who understood the story understood exactly who it was. Jordan allowed himself one small breath before continuing. He was led through 2 layers of security, each checkpoint smoother than the last. The guards didn't stop him. The scanners didn't hesitate. Every door opened for him without request. His arrival wasn't questioned. It had been arranged long before he set foot on these floors. Finally, the last door opened into a wide conference chamber. A long glass table sat at the center beneath an enormous digital display cycling through federal case files. Several officials sat waiting, their faces neutral, assessing. At the head of the table sat Director Claudia Reyes. Her sharp eyes met Jordan's with the same precision she once used to dismantle Captain Dorne. "Mr. Ellis," she said, voice even. "You're early, only by a few months." Jordan answered with quiet confidence. Reyes smiled faintly. Punctuality in this line of work is a good trait. He stepped forward, offering his folder. She didn't need to open it. She already knew what was inside. Instead, her gaze shifted to the corner of the envelope to the signature mark, E01. The weight of those characters filled the room. "I assume you know who authorized your placement?" Reyes asked, though it wasn't really a question. Jordan nodded. "Yes, ma'am. And you understand the history of how you arrived here, I do." The officials around the table exchanged brief looks. Silent acknowledgement passed between them. They all knew what this was, the continuation of something far older than any of them would put into writing. Reyes folded her hands. "Then, let me be clear. You're not here simply as an intern. You've been placed inside a system that once tried very hard to forget certain names. Your job is to ensure that forgetting never happens again." Jordan didn't blink. "Yeah, ma'am." Reyes studied him a moment longer. In his face, she saw something familiar, not physically, but deeper. The quiet composure of someone who carried a legacy, not written in files, but passed down through silence. Behind Jordan, mounted on the far wall, a small black plaque sat under dim lighting. It didn't have a name, just a symbol. 3 concentric rings stamped into the metal, the same symbol that had been on the Omega agent's shoulders. The same symbol that had once been stitched into Elias Mercer's file. Echo Division. Jordan turned his head slightly toward it, then back to Reyes. The room felt heavy, but not with intimidation, with purpose. Reyes gave one final nod. "Welcome to the program." And with that, Jordan Ellis took his seat at the table, carrying forward the weight of what Elias Mercer had once fought to protect. The system had tried to erase names. It had buried files. It had silenced men. But some legacies aren't written in archives. They're carried in people. And now, the system would remember because someone had made sure it couldn't forget. What can we, as American citizens, really learn from this? The story you just witnessed wasn't just about Captain Dorne losing his badge, or Elias Mercer disappearing behind classified walls. No, this was a warning, a mirror, a lesson about power, silence, and responsibility. For over 15 years, Dorne wore the badge like it was armor, convincing himself that following orders was enough, that looking away wasn't the same as being guilty. But silence, in the face of injustice, is not neutral. It's complicity. Marcus Mercer died because those sworn to protect the system chose comfort over courage. And yet, as the system buried that truth, people like Elias Mercer didn't forget. They waited. They built mechanisms that live far beyond uniforms and titles. In today's America, the message hits harder than ever. We trust systems to police themselves, to correct mistakes, to stand for justice. But systems are only as strong as the people willing to speak when it's uncomfortable, when corruption hides behind authority, and good men say nothing. That's when true danger takes root. But Mercer's legacy reminds us silence isn't permanent. Files can be erased, but memory lives in people. And that memory, passed to young men like Jordan Ellis, ensures the fight continues. Because every time someone chooses to speak, to question, to refuse to be complicit, that's one more blow against the decay. So ask yourself, where would you stand if the system whispered, "Look away"? Would you? Now, if this story made you think, if it shook you, challenged you, or opened your eyes, then don't let it end here. Hit that subscribe button right now, like this video, so more people can hear stories that most will never see. Share it with your friends, your family, your co-workers. Because the more people know these truths, the harder it becomes for silence to win. And remember, whether it's 15 minutes, 15 months, or 15 years, truth always finds its way back.